The Galactic Harmony Discovery. Zephyr Clara adjusted her sensory appendages as she hovered over the ancient artifact. The bone flute, carefully preserved in a stasis field, was unremarkable to the untrained eye, just a hollowed fragment with deliberate holes carved into its length. But to Zephyr, the senior xenomusicologist of the Galactic Archives, it represented a profound mystery. Specimen 24,601. Homo sapiens origin, carbon dated to approximately 43,000 Earth years before present, she dictated to her recording unit, predating all evidence of organized warfare among the species by nearly 30,000 years. The archive chamber hummed with the subtle vibrations that her species, the Lyranth, used for ambient lighting. Zephyr's 12-fingered hands moved delicately over her instruments as she prepared to analyze the flute's acoustical properties for the 100th time. The results always fascinated and confused her. Tonal range analysis confirms previous findings, she noted as harmonics danced across her display. Perfect pentatonic scale. Intentional harmonic relationships. Evidence of advanced understanding of acoustical principles. The contradiction had been gnawing at her for cycles. According to all established xenoanthropological theory, predator species followed a predictable developmental path. Tools for hunting, weapons for territorial defense, organized warfare. Then, much later, arts and aesthetics as luxury byproducts of civilization. Yet here was humanity, defying every established pattern. A chime signaled an incoming transmission. The holographic form of Counselor Drax materialized beside her workstation, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the archive lights. Archivist Clara, he greeted with the formal tone the Arachnid Collective always employed. The Council requires your preliminary findings on human musical development. The delegation arrives tomorrow. Zephyr's skin flushed a concerned violet. Counselor, my research is ongoing. I've barely begun to. The humans have requested full membership in the Galactic Confederation. Drax interrupted. After their performance in the Orion conflict, many council members are concerned about their unpredictable nature. Your insights into their development may prove critical. After Drax's image dissipated, Zephyr slumped against her workstation. Humans had been discovered only 30 cycles ago, a primitive spacefaring race from a backwater star system. Yet they had already proven themselves decisive allies in the recent Orion conflict, their unorthodox military tactics turning the tide against the swarm. Now they sought full membership, and the Council was nervous. Species with humanity's predatory origins typically required millennia of guided integration before they could be trusted with the full technological privileges of membership. Zephyr activated the primary archive interface. Display all artifacts and recordings related to human music, chronological order. The chamber's walls illuminated with thousands of images, bone flutes, skin drums, stringed instruments of increasing complexity, notation systems, orchestral arrangements, electronic synthesizers, neural harmonic interfaces. Recordings began to play simultaneously, a cacophony spanning human history that Zephyr quickly adjusted to sequential playback. A primal drumbeat from 38,000 years ago. A reconstructed melody from ancient Mesopotamia. Greek modes. Medieval chants. Renaissance counterpoint. Classical symphonies. Jazz improvisation. Electronic compositions. The evolution was staggering in its complexity and innovation. Zephyr settled in for a night without sleep, her 6 eyes fixed on the data streaming before her. There was a pattern here, something fundamental about humans that the Confederation had missed, something that might explain how a predator species had developed such sophisticated artistic expression millennia before turning their creative energies to warfare. By morning, she had her hypothesis. The council chamber was imposing by design, a vast amphitheater with representatives from the 87 member species arranged according to seniority. As one of the youngest members of the xenological research team, Zephyr was positioned near the bottom, her presentation terminal barely visible to the senior counselors. Archivist Clara, the quorum speaker announced, their gelatinous form pulsing with formal indigo patterns. You may present your findings on human musical development. Zephyr activated her display, projecting images of the bone flutes throughout the chamber. Esteemed counselors, my research concerns a developmental anomaly in human evolution that defies our established understanding of predator species progression. Humans developed complex musical expression approximately 43,000 years ago, while their first evidence of organized warfare appears only 13,000 years ago. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Counselor Vreet, representing the mollusk concordance, extended a sensory stalk. Perhaps their warfare artifacts simply didn't preserve well, Vreet suggested, his translation unit conveying skepticism. Bone survives where wood and hide weapons might decay. I considered that possibility, Zephyr replied, advancing her display to show cave paintings. However, humans meticulously documented their activities through visual art. Early paintings show hunting, ritual, and community activities, but no warfare imagery until much later. Furthermore, genetic analysis of burial sites confirms low levels of violent trauma in early human populations. What is your hypothesis, then? Asked the quorum speaker. Zephyr hesitated, knowing her conclusion would be controversial. I believe humans developed music not as a luxury of civilization, but as an evolutionary strategy. Music served as a social bonding mechanism, enabling complex cooperation without the hierarchical dominance structures common to most predator species. She activated an audio simulation. This is a computational model of early human vocalization patterns based on anatomical reconstructions and neurological mapping. The chamber filled with haunting harmonies, simple but emotionally evocative. Humans possess extraordinary neurological responses to musical stimuli. Their brains release bonding hormones during musical activities. Music literally changed their brain chemistry, promoting empathy and cooperation. Another counselor, a silicon-based entity from the crystalline worlds, pulsed with skepticism. Yet they became formidable warriors nonetheless. Their tactics in the Orion conflict were disturbingly effective. That's precisely my point, Zephyr countered. Humans didn't develop warfare until after they had developed complex social bonds. When they finally turned to organized conflict, they did so with extraordinary coordination and sacrifice for group welfare. Music taught them to function as unified entities, to feel what others feel. The display shifted to footage from Earth, massive orchestras moving in perfect synchronicity, crowds swaying together at concerts, warriors dancing before battle. I believe this explains their rapid adaptation to interspecies cooperation as well. Their neurological wiring, shaped by millennia of musical development, predisposes them to synchronize with others, even those very different from themselves. The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled representatives. Humans were not simply anomalous predators. They represented an entirely different evolutionary pathway, one where art preceded aggression, where empathy enhanced rather than hindered predatory efficiency. What are the security implications? Drax finally asked, voicing the concern hanging in the chamber. Before Zephyr could respond, the chamber doors parted. The human delegation had arrived early, led by Ambassador Elena Chen. The slender human female moved with the deliberate grace her species was known for, flanked by two other humans carrying strange objects. Counselors, Ambassador Chen greeted with a formal bow. We apologize for our early arrival, but we were informed of Archivist Kalera's presentation and thought we might contribute. The quorum speaker pulsed with surprise but gestured permission. Archivist Kalera's research aligns with our own understanding of our development, Chen continued. We brought something to demonstrate. She nodded to her companions. The humans arranged themselves in a triangular formation and lifted their instruments, physical constructs of wood and metal that Zephyr recognized as violin, cello, and viola. Without electronic assistance or neural interfaces, they began to play. The sound that filled the chamber transcended the clinical recordings Zephyr had studied. It carried something ineffable, an emotional resonance that even the diverse neurological systems of the council could perceive. Some representatives leaned forward in their suspension fields. Others changed coloration or pheromone output. When the brief performance ended, the chamber remained silent for several moments. "This is how we communicate what cannot be said," Ambassador Chen explained softly. "Before we had weapons, before we had cities, we had music. It taught us to understand each other's feelings, to coordinate our actions, to imagine possibilities. When we finally did develop warfare, we carried those lessons with us." The quorum speaker's translucent form rippled thoughtfully. "I begin to understand Archivist Clara's point. Your species developed empathy before aggression." "Not exactly," Chen corrected gently. "We always had aggression. We are predators, after all. But music gave us something more powerful. The ability to channel that aggression, to control it collectively, to direct it with purpose rather than instinct." As the formal council session continued, Zephyr found herself watching the human musicians rather than the proceedings. They had set aside their instruments but remained perfectly attentive, their expressions shifting in subtle response to the diplomatic exchange. They were synchronized not by technology or telepathy, but by something more fundamental, a shared emotional language developed over millennia of making music together. The mystery that had confounded her was starting to resolve itself. Humans weren't an anomaly in predator species development. They represented something else entirely, a third evolutionary pathway, neither fully predator nor prey, but something more complex and potentially more powerful. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. The symphony of survival. 3 cycles had passed since humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Confederation. Zephyr had continued her research into human music, establishing a dedicated institute that attracted scholars from across known space. Today, however, her work was interrupted by an urgent council summons. Emergency protocols had transformed the usually ceremonial council chamber into a military command center. Representatives from all member species huddled around holographic displays, their usual formalities abandoned in the face of crisis. Archivist Clara, the quorum speaker acknowledged as she entered. "Your expertise is required." At the center of the chamber, a simulation displayed a terrifying reality. Expanding zones of darkness spreading across the galactic map, systems going silent one after another. "The Void Cascade," explained Admiral Thraxon of the Confederation Defense Force. "It began at the Perseus Arm outposts 2 standard weeks ago. We've lost contact with 17 systems already." Zephyr's skin paled. "I don't understand. I'm a xenomusicologist. How can I assist with a military crisis?" Counselor Drax stepped forward. "The Void isn't simply destroying our outposts. It's absorbing them. Conventional weapons pass through without effect. Energy shields fail. It appears to operate on fundamental principles our sciences cannot explain." The quorum speaker gestured to another figure in the chamber, Ambassador Chen, now serving as the human representative to the council. "The humans have proposed an approach," the speaker continued, "one based on your research into their musical development. We find it difficult to comprehend, but given the failure of conventional responses, the council has agreed to consider unconventional measures." Chen nodded to Zephyr. "We believe the Void Cascade operates on principles similar to destructive wave interference. It cancels out the fundamental vibrational patterns that maintain matter and energy cohesion in our universe." "That's not possible," protested a representative from the Quantum Directorate. "Subatomic structure doesn't function like." "According to our physics, no," Chen interrupted. "But we're clearly encountering a phenomenon that transcends our understanding of physics." She turned to Zephyr. "Your research showed how human music evolved from pattern recognition. Our ability to detect, replicate, and manipulate wave patterns for communication and bonding. We believe we can apply similar principles on a quantum scale." The proposal was outlandish by conventional scientific standards, using principles derived from music theory to create a counter-resonance field that might stabilize reality against the void's destructive interference. It shouldn't work according to any established physics. Yet conventional physics had already failed. Zephyr found herself aboard the Confederation research vessel Harmonic Inquiry 3 days later, surrounded by an improbable team of human musicians, xenophysicists, and engineers. The ship maintained position at safe distance from the expanding edge of the nearest void cascade, instruments deployed to analyze its properties. "It's like nothing we've ever encountered," reported Chief Scientist Vorn, their crystalline structure glittering with agitation. "The void doesn't destroy matter. It unravels the quantum coherence that maintains reality itself." Elena Chen, now serving as project coordinator, studied the readings with unnerving calm. "Show me the wave pattern analysis." The display transformed into complex, overlapping waveforms that rippled and shifted chaotically. "There," Chen pointed. "Do you see it? There's a pattern within the chaos." Zephyr focused her sensory organs on the display, trying to perceive what the human somehow intuited. "I don't." Wait. Something clicked in her perception. The chaos isn't random. It's polyphonic. Chen smiled. "Exactly. Multiple destructive patterns operating simultaneously, each reinforcing the others, like a fugue of annihilation." One of the human musicians, a composer named Takashi, leaned forward. "If it's a fugue, then it can be countered with an inverse counterpoint." The next 70 hours blurred together as the improbable team worked to translate musical theory into quantum mechanics. They weren't simply creating a counter-frequency. They were composing a multi-dimensional response that anticipated and adapted to the void's patterns. The humans worked in shifts, composing intricate mathematical structures based on Bach's counterpoint techniques, West African polyrhythms, and Gamlan orchestral patterns. Zephyr watched in fascination as they often broke into spontaneous musical collaboration when words failed them, humming, tapping, and gesturing to communicate complex ideas that transcended language. The Confederation engineers, initially skeptical, gradually began to understand. They translated the musical mathematics into quantum field generators, devices that would project the counter pattern into the advancing void. "We're ready for the first test," Chen announced as the fabrication units completed the final generator. The atmosphere on the command deck was tense as the generator deployed toward the void's perimeter. Conventional sensors couldn't penetrate the darkness, but specialized instruments showed the quantum fluctuations at its boundary. "Initiating harmonic sequence," Takashi announced, his fingers dancing across the control interface designed to translate musical input into quantum outputs. The generator pulsed, invisible energies flowing outward. For several moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then, at the very edge of the void, a flicker of normal space reappeared. "It's working," exclaimed Vorn, their crystalline structure vibrating with excitement. But the success was short-lived. The void pattern shifted, adapting to the counter-resonance. The reclaimed space vanished back into darkness. "It's learning," Chen observed, unsurprised. "Just as we anticipated." Takashi nodded. "Now for Phase 2. The humans had prepared for this. Rather than a fixed counter-pattern, they initiated what they called Jazz Protocol, an improvisational response that adjusted in real time to the void shifts. The quantum generators became instruments in a cosmic performance, with the human operators and AI systems collaborating to maintain a dynamic opposition to the void's destructive patterns. Gradually, impossibly, a stable boundary formed. The void's expansion halted. "Containment achieved," reported a technician. "But we can't maintain this indefinitely. The power requirements are enormous." Chen turned to Zephyr. "This is only the beginning. We need to understand what the void actually is, and why it responds to harmonic principles." Deep scans of the stabilized boundary revealed something astonishing. The void wasn't a natural phenomenon or conventional weapon. It was a communication attempt gone catastrophically wrong, a probe from a civilization that existed in a different dimensional framework, trying to make contact but unaware that their signals manifested as destructive interference in our reality. "They're singing to us," Zephyr realized, studying the intricate patterns. but their song unmakes our world. With this understanding, the human team reconfigured their approach. Rather than simply opposing the pattern, they began to modify it, preserving its essential structure while transforming its destructive properties into something compatible with our universe's physical laws. When the final sequence activated, the void didn't simply recede, it transformed. Darkness gave way to shimmering fields of energy that stabilized into visible patterns, like cosmic auroras spanning entire systems. "We've established communication," Chen announced quietly. In the following weeks, as the remaining void cascades were transformed and the first tentative exchanges with the extra-dimensional entities began, Zephyr found herself documenting a new chapter in galactic history. The council chamber reconvened for a formal recognition ceremony, with the human team placed in the position of honor usually reserved for founding species. What the humans achieved could not have been accomplished through conventional science or military power, the quorum speaker acknowledged. They applied principles developed through their unique evolutionary history, principles of harmony, counterpoint, and improvisation that no other species had fully developed. Zephyr watched as representatives from across the Confederation approached the humans with new respect and curiosity. The same predator species that many had feared was now recognized as carrying a profound gift, the ability to perceive, create, and manipulate patterns in ways that transcended conventional logic. After the ceremony, she found Elena Chen standing alone on an observation deck, gazing out at the stars. "I've been wondering," Zephyr said, joining her. "Does it surprise you that music saved us, in the end?" Chen smiled. "Not really. Music was humanity's first technology for connecting with what we couldn't understand, for reaching beyond ourselves." She gestured toward the cosmos. "Before we had language for the stars, we had songs about them. Before we could explain consciousness, we expressed it through rhythm and melody. Music was never just entertainment for us. It was our way of reaching toward mystery." Zephyr's research had come full circle. Humanity's anomalous development, creating music 30,000 years before war, wasn't merely a strange evolutionary quirk. It represented something fundamental about their approach to existence itself. "Your species developed tools to understand the universe," Chen continued thoughtfully. "Most developed weapons to conquer it. We developed music to harmonize with it." As they stood together watching distant stars, Zephyr realized the Confederation had gained far more than a powerful ally or innovative problem solvers. They had encountered a species that offered a third path for civilization, one where art wasn't a luxury that followed survival, but the very thing that made survival possible. Humanity had mastered music 30,000 years before war because, perhaps, they had sensed all along that the universe itself was more song than battlefield.